Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Nate here. And big, brutish, and majestic, giants are one of Skyrim's most fascinating inhabitants. Massive, primitive, humanoid beings, they've been grazing the lands of northern Tamriel for as long as anyone can remember. Known for their large encampments and domesticated mammoths, giants have personalities almost as big as their bodies, representing an interesting challenge for the humans and elves they share their lands with. Occasionally, the beasts do come into conflict with farmers and country folk. But there's also a lot of evidence to suggest the beings are capable of reason and diplomacy. And some tribes are able to exist in perfect harmony with their more civilized neighbors. To say giants are an interesting kind of organism in the Elder Scrolls V would be an understatement. And you better believe that what Skyrim tells us is only just the beginning, as there's quite a bit more interesting information about these bipedal big guys than the game immediately lets on, and some of the most interesting lore on these creatures requires some further digging. So today we'll be taking a look at 5 things you probably didn't know about giants in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Starting off, the origins of giants as a species on Tamriel is one of the bigger mysteries in the Elder Scrolls universe. Some players believe that they're natives to the continent, and have been around just as long, if not longer, than any of the other land's natural species. Others suggest, and this is the theory that I would like to explore, that giants came from Atmora, a now lost, uninhabitable icy continent that was once north of Tamriel. Atmora is where most modern men descend from. No one's visited the place in thousands of years, and we literally have no maps of the region. But apparently, it once hosted bustling cities and a sophisticated society. Eventually, as temperatures began to cool, men sailed down from Atmora to Tamriel, and started to settle modern-day Skyrim, High Rock, and Cyrodiil in the Malefic era. Many players suspect that due to the considerable physical similarities shared with modern men, giants also originally came from Atmora too. Now, there's some very strong evidence to support this theory, and I think the strongest comes from Michael Kirkbride. So, fans of the channel are already very familiar with Kirkbride. I mean, I literally mentioned him in my last video, but just in case you're unaware, Michael Kirkbride was a former lead writer for Bethesda Game Studios, who has contributed extensively to the Elder Scrolls' lore, and wrote for The Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, and TES 4 Oblivion. When he eventually departed from Bethesda after Oblivion, Kirkbride, still so passionate about this universe, continued to write Elder Scrolls lore, creating stories and in-universe books that he would publish online. Now, I should say that most of what Kirkbride was writing after he officially left Bethesda can't be considered total canon. I mean, it's technically just fanfiction, but given the fact that he's actually worked for Bethesda, and did so for quite a while with a high position, and the fact that many of the things he wrote in his online postings actually came true in Skyrim, we should at least take his musings somewhat seriously. Anyway, in one of his fan-fiction books, written from the perspective of an old Nord speaking to an audience, Kirkbride comments on the origins of Tamriel's giants, and suggests that they very much came from Atmora too, and are the ancestors of modern man. Quote, "The giants came from old Atmora, up there across the northern ice, back in the gone-to-twilight now age of myth, and settled here in Skyrim, along the mountain ranges of our coasts. Yes, they are our true ancestors. Do not believe your aunt from the university. And yes, we were once as big and as tall as them. As tall as this. But that is another story." End quote. Kirkbride seems to indicate that giants arrived in Skyrim first. However, sometime after modern humans came as well, the two species lived in harmony, interacting, trading, socializing, and very rarely getting into squabbles. That said, later on in this book, there's the implication that long ago, in the earliest days of Skyrim's settlement by the Nords, giants were much more intelligent and civilized. Until, well, something strange happened. Kirkbride writes, quote, "After the Great Calamity, we were kind of disrupted, and we Nords fell into fighting and drove our giant kin up unto the mountaintops. Once things got back to a new semblance of normalcy, and borders were redrawn and agreed within beer talk, and ratings of the Marethlands, basically Elven territory, took everyone's mind off old feuds, and pretty soon, well, not pretty soon, but whatever, the giants began to come down from the mountains again. And they were different than we Nords remembered. Or perhaps we had forgotten much, but they would not speak to us anymore. They would only smile in their lazy way, stomp over, and take our stuff." End quote. Something, the Great Calamity, whatever that was, happened, which caused the Nords to drive their giant brethren into the mountains. And when they eventually came back, evidently the giants were different than anyone could recall. Something happened while they were away. This is essentially Kirkbride's explanation for the origins of the big bipods we meet in Skyrim. And while again, Kirkbride's work can't be taken as total canon, and contains many mysteries in its own right, it is an interesting explanation behind one of Tamriel's oddest creatures. Next on our list, giants were, believe it or not, supposed to occupy a considerable role in Skyrim's Civil War. Yes, Bethesda had originally planned for these big dumb brutes to be center stage in a handful of Civil War quests, and even recruitable by each faction. And while the developers recorded countless dialogue files and created numerous scripts related to this mission, they ultimately cut all of that content from the game before release. Apparently, there would have been a mission offered by each side, wherein the Dovahkiin would learn that giants have recently been harassing their side's supply caravans, and we'd be dispatched to deal with the creatures. And eventually, some way or another, we'd even be offered the opportunity to recruit those giants to our cause. Take a listen to just some of the now lost dialogue.
"And then there's a tiny problem with a giant attacking our supply caravans. A giant! As if I didn't have enough to deal with."
I'm not necessarily sure what advantages recruiting these giants would have boasted. Would we start seeing them helping us in battles, perhaps? Or would we get a reward from our faction for earning them such powerful allies? It's unclear, and the cut files we do have access to don't tell us the entire story. Whatever the case, the fact that they could be motivated to pick sides in such a complex conflict, or at least the fact that Bethesda had originally wanted them to be able to, is even further indication of the idea that Skyrim's giants are quite a bit smarter and more intelligent than one may initially suspect. Coming in at number 3, in Skyrim, pretty much all giants share the same model. Some have slight alterations to their wardrobe and equipment, but for the most part, they all look pretty much the same, and all have identical faces. The appearance of giants, that being their model and texture, was all designed by Jonah Loeb, one of Skyrim's many artists, and he was given nearly free reign to make the creatures look like pretty much whatever he wanted. Well, whatever he wanted, so long as the creatures lived up to the suggestions of the game's concept art. Funnily enough, Jonah recently revealed on Twitter that given how much freedom he had, he decided to base the appearance of giants off of his own father's. Yep, Jonah revealed this, celebrating the fact that gamers across the world have killed his dad's doppelganger, quote-unquote, millions of times. So, if you've ever wondered where these handsome devils got their good looks, well, the answer is in Jonahs Dad, and I guess his Twitter feed. By the way, I highly recommend that you follow Jonah Loeb's own Twitter account, @JonahLoeb. He departed Bethesda not too long ago, but still constantly posts interesting facts and information about some of his work behind the scenes on Skyrim and Fallout 4 as well. Which, as you can imagine, just makes the account an absolute goldmine for somebody like me. For fourth spot, where are all the lady giants? We just mentioned that in Skyrim, there's pretty much one model and texture used for all giants across the board, And those giants are all, unanimously, males. Why? Well, the most simple answer that most people turn to is it's a gameplay limitation. Bethesda just didn't want to have to design multiple different models and textures for these creatures, and that would make quite a bit of sense. But many players suspect the answer's a bit deeper than that. Now, community theories about this can get pretty wild. Some players even argue that maybe there are female giants. They just grow beards and look exactly like the males. Some have also proposed, and this is the theory that I think I find the most seductive, that female giants do exist, they just don't inhabit the lands of Skyrim. Perhaps giants keep all of their ladies, and maybe little children too, far away from human civilization. Maybe deep in the mountains. Remember how earlier in this video we talked about Michael Kirkbride's explanation behind the origins of giants? Well, in that explanation, he mentions that for a very long time, all of Skyrim's giants fled into the mountains, and lived there for quite a while. Eventually, many of them came back down and were quite a bit different, but it's possible the giants found quite a bit of safety in the mountains, and maybe that's where they chose to keep all of their most vulnerable people. It should also be noted that we at least know for a fact female giants exist. It's not like these male giants are like reproducing by themselves and laying eggs or something. No. The Elder Scrolls Online confirmed the existence of lady giants as, well, we can meet female giants in ESO. So that settles that. Oh well, regardless, despite what Skyrim shows us, female giants are absolutely a real thing in the Elder Scrolls universe. Now we just gotta find out what baby and infant giants look like, because that would be an interesting thing. And finally, last on our list, did you know that in the Elder Scrolls universe, we can encounter at least one NPC that's said to be half giant? Meet Lyris Titanborn, a Nord players can encounter in Cold Harbor in the Elder Scrolls Online. Lyris was born sometime in the mid-Second Era to a normal, unnamed Nord woman, and her husband Yolder, a half-Nord, half-giant man. According to what she tells us, when Lyris was born, she was such a large baby that her mother passed away in childbirth. This is actually a huge source of unfortunate stress and anxiety for Lyris even today. Lyris was raised by her father to be quite a warrior, and her massive size aided her greatly. Eventually, once she became of age, she marched south to Cyrodiil to join Emperor Varen's personal inner circle of some of the greatest fighters in all of Tamriel. One thing led to another, and her emperor were sadly captured by Daedra, and she spent the past few hundred years here in Molag Bal's Plain of Oblivion, Cold Harbor. Fittingly, Lyris is by far the tallest female character we can meet in ESO. She's so tall, in fact, not even we the player can make our character nearly her height in the game's character editor. Not only is Miss Titanborn an interesting character in her own right, but her existence somewhat supports the theory that giants and human Nords are in some capacity related or descended from each other, seen as they're apparently able to mate. Remember, in that earlier text we shared from Kirkbride, he blatantly states that modern man descended from giant. And Lyris' existence only further substantiates that theory. Now, do keep in mind, ESO takes place thousands upon thousands of years prior to the events of Skyrim, and we have no idea how deep Lyris' connection to giants is. Was her father half-giant? Perhaps her father's father was half-giant. We don't exactly know the whole family tree, making it a little bit difficult to discern if it's possible for just any Nord to go up and get a little bit frisky with a giant and create some massive child, or if the lineage needs to extend back quite a few years. No matter, I think it's safe to say that, in some capacity, giants really do walk among us. Huh? Oh, that wasn't even that funny. Oh well, alright, video's over. And with that, we are going to wrap up. 5 things you probably didn't know about giants in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Which of these interesting facts or curious conundrums did you find to be the most interesting? And what fun Skyrim details or Easter eggs do you know of that I've yet to cover? Leave a comment down below. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.